Vera.
Good evening. My name is Donna Vera, and I'm the city manager of Louisville. And this is one of our quarterly meetings that we've tried to continue to have even during these times of COVID. We have a number of topics to cover with you. I'm looking at our listing of participants, and we have very few. Most of you I know. Hi, Guy. And so most of you are very familiar with these issues. But we will still abide by the agenda and go through the information that we have to present tonight. I'm really hoping that future quarterly meetings that we're able to be back together and able to get more participation. So first off on the agenda is a discussion of the annexation process itself. And so I have to go back in time. I feel like life right now is either pre-COVID or post the event, right? And so when you talk about pre-COVID, we were at our February 2020 retreat and everything was normal then. And we were talking about Castle Hills and the steps that we would take for annexation. So the direction I received from the city council was that we should appoint an education committee that would work with us so that we can educate the residents of Castle Hills about annexation. We were planning to start that in the March through June of 2020 period, and we were going to hire a third-party facilitator to work with us on that. Then we planned to move forward with annexation in kind of a two-step process. So we would first work with the district boards, and hopefully they would amend their SPA agreements in July of 2020 to make annexation effective July of 21. That's a nice, neat package. So if all of the districts put that in place, we would know very specifically that we were going to annex in July of 2021, and we would be able to get all those pieces in place so necessary to make annexation successful. We were also working with the Denton County Appraisal District, and they had told us that if we annexed as we had planned, but that we got a resolution passed by March of 2021 concerning that date of annexation, then we would be able to actually include the values of Castle Hills into the city's total role as we were setting the 21-22 budget. So that's what in February I left retreat with that direction, and then COVID hit. And with that, everything changed. It certainly disrupted the appointment of the committee. It disrupted everything. And so we were not able to do a lot of the tasks that we had planned. In addition, we were worried about financial revenue losses. What kind of loss would result from the COVID situation? If you remember the annexation, once we annex, we take on not only the values, the property values of Castle Hills, we take on all the debt. And that debt is $142.9 million. So we have always said that we would not annex if there was going to be a significant impact to the city's debt rate. And so that became more of a question for us as we started looking at the impacts of COVID, the economy shutting down. So really no way to know what the future might hold as far as values and revenues. On top of everything else, then we got a new legal opinion from the Denton Central Appraisal District. They've had a major change in staff, so they came back with a new legal opinion, and they said that the Castle Hills assessed values could not be added to the city assessed values if annexation occurred after January 1. So if we had annexed in July, that would mean that we would be taking in all that debt without those values being added to the road. And that would have had significant negative impacts on the Louisville rate. So those were the changes that have occurred. And so we had gone back to council and talked about those findings. We now know a little bit more about the economy. So with our recent roll that we received very late, normally we get it by July 25th. We didn't really get a final roll until late September. But we did find the city's final tax roll had increased by 0.2%. If you look at the districts, they increased on average 7.23%, but most of that growth is in the two districts that are still developing, 1G and 1H. That growth was a little over 28%. 1B through 1F, the older districts, increased about 1.89%. So what's still though unknown is what will occur next fiscal year. So what will happen next July 25th to those values? That's still an unknown. But based on the information we have, we are moving forward with discussions of annexation. So we have now, as of today, today's the first day of the fiscal year, the new 2021 fiscal year. We have had a kickoff meeting with our Castle Hills Education Committee. We are developing a list of topics that we will start presenting to them in January. And those in-depth presentations will continue maybe past April. We're still working through that schedule with the committee. But the goal there is certainly to educate the residents of Castle Hills all about annexation. What happens if annexation occurs? What happens if annexation does not occur? We'll be very anxious to receive that assessed value, the final roll, on July of 2021. I'm positive and hoping that we're going to still see no dramatic decreases. I mean, Texas still seems to be growing. People still seem to be moving here. Developers don't seem to be hesitating about developments. So we're very positive about what that role might look like come July of 2021. So on the schedule, that would mean that in August of 2021, both the city and the district boards would be adopting their separate FY 21-22 budgets. In August through September, we would ask that the boards start amending their SPA agreements. Remember, the key date now is that annexation has to occur before January. And so we would be asking the SPA boards, or excuse me, the district boards to amend their SPA agreements effective December of 2021. So those are the steps that would occur this fiscal year for proposed annexation. So James, go to the next. So the next fiscal year, when we start looking at 21-22, if all of the districts amend their SPA agreement to have annexation in December of 21, then the city council would amend the SPA agreement, and then annexation would actually occur in December of 2021. At that point in time, we would take over all of the liabilities and the budgets, the established budgets of the various district boards. That's why it's so very important that in the 21-22 process, we start working with the boards on those district budgets. So we know that we have the money necessary in FY 21-22 to pay any salaries, to pay debt payments, and those type of things. So we've met, if all of this happens, we will have met the requirements of annexing prior to January of 2022. We will then start working on creation of the residential districts. Under the city's charter, residential districts become effective if an annexation of a certain size, property size occurs, which would be Castle Hills. And so we would start working with the city council on drawing those residential district boundary lines with the first election, including Castle Hills residents in May of 2022. Then in July, we would have the final assessed values roll, including Castle Hills. We'd have that in July of 22. And then we would adopt a tax rate, including Castle Hills, for the 22-23 year. So you go to that next slide, James. 22-23, that's the first fiscal year where we have a combined Louisville, Castle Hills tax roll, and we move forward. The education plan, as I mentioned earlier, we did kick off on in August, or we discussed it in August of 2020. We just actually kicked it off in September of 2020. When we'll be researching, we're going to develop formal detailed reports on a number of topics. And the way this will work, we've hired Karen Walls, will be our facilitator. Karen will be leading discussions at each one of our meetings regarding these various topics. What we didn't want was city staff just standing up there talking, going through PowerPoints. We think it's really important that we provide these really detailed reports that people can take and study and analyze, and then come to those meetings prepared to ask questions, to become knowledgeable, and then to be able to go out and talk to others about it. That's really the process and the purpose. We will make sure we develop these reports so that they're given 2 weeks in advance of each meeting. So the members of the committee can actually study and be well informed, and we can have a really great conversation about the various topics. So with that, that is where we are on the planning of the Castle Hills annexation, and I will take any questions anyone might have.
If you have a question or comment, you can put it in the chat function, or the best way is to click the raise your hand button, and then I will see your hand is up and I will unmute your microphone so you can speak.
We do have Karen Walls on the call, and Karen is our facilitator. Karen, I don't know if you want to add any details to that.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Yeah, it's great to be with everybody, at least virtually. Donna's done a great job of explaining the purpose and kind of the schedule of the whole annexation process. And it's obvious from that and from all the other discussions everyone's had that there's a lot involved in annexing an area as complex as Castle Hills. So I might just add a few words about the committee and elaborate a little bit on what Donna was sharing just a moment ago. For those of you who are either other members of the district boards or residents in Castle Hills, the committee is really intended to do a couple of things that relate to educating and informing the board members of all of the Castle Hills boards, as well as all the residents and property owners of Castle Hills about the issues related to annexation. And so there's 3 parts to that. The first part is we're looking to the committee to help us make sure we know all the questions that are out there, all the issues, all the things that people are hearing or wondering about. The committee is helping us by telling us what the questions are. That's the first thing. The second thing is then, as Donna said, the staff will prepare detailed formal reports to deal with those issues. And right now we've got a list of about 9 different topics. Each of those topics has a whole bunch of questions underneath them, everything from how does this decision process work, to what will happen to the public safety services, to what's the status of all the parcels that might be parks or open space, to what happens in development after annexation, all kinds of things like that. So there will be formal, written, detailed reports responding to each of those questions based on what the committee is telling us, and what we're hearing are things people would need to know more about. The third part of the committee's role and activities is going to be that they will meet as a committee, as Donna said, to discuss the information in those reports, and then they will go back and share that information with all of you. So you will be able to look to the representatives on the committee to get you detailed, clear, sound, correct answers to the questions, and all these different questions that are out there about how exactly this will work. And so you can see that the committee is going to play a really important role in terms of communication and in terms of education of everybody to understand what's going on, what the choices are, what the implications are And it's a bit of a challenge too, because it's kind of a moving target. As Donna shared with you earlier, the things that have changed with COVID, continuing research, the agreement about the parks. At one time, I think we figured there were about 37 parcels, and now there's over 130 parcels. So as there are changes, we're trying to make sure everybody has good information on all of that. And so the committee members will be the ones who will be able to communicate and educate everybody else. So when we say the committee members, there are 2 members from the boards of each of the districts, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F, 1G, and then there are 4 additional members at large. So Castle Hills residents at large in addition to that. So that makes 16 people, and those folks will be the ones that are going to do that communication. As Donna said, both Castle Hills District and the city have jointly hired me to be the facilitator for these sessions. And I've done a lot of work on projects like this in many different places over the years. So I know the importance of making sure that everybody has a chance to make their voice heard, and that we can come up with some clear conclusions at the end of those discussions. So I'm looking forward to working with everybody. As Donna said, format will be that the committee members will get materials 2 weeks ahead of time. When we come to the meeting of the committees that will start in January and go through around April or so, we'll be focusing the entire time of the meeting on discussion by the committee members and questions that they have, and the staff can respond, but basically it'll be a time for the committee. So I'm looking forward to working with them on this, helping to get clear answers to the questions that are out there and a good understanding of the impacts of this important change in Castle Hills and really in Louisville as well. So Donna, I think that's kind of what I wanted to share. Is there anything else that you would like me to cover, or are there questions from other folks on the call?
Karen, the other thing I would add is at our last meeting, we did offer that by Zoom and in person. So we were
you're right, Donna. As much as we all would like to be in person, we are making sure that at least as things stand now, the committee will meet with the options of both in person with social distancing and with Zoom. And we did indeed have that last week. We had, I think, all but maybe one person participating, and it was a really good discussion. So I think everybody's really enthusiastic about their role, and I'm certainly looking forward to continuing the discussions with all of them with either or both or whatever means it turns out that we're dealing with come January.
So I think that's all I had, and Karen, thank you very much for those comments.
Yeah.
We don't have any more questions, James. I'll turn it over to the next presenter.
Next will be Gina.
Okay, and I'm going to sign off. I appreciate the chance to visit with all of you.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay.
You ready for budget?
I am. Here's the pretty one.
Hopefully everybody can see the PowerPoint. We're going to start with to the next one, Jim. The budget process. We quickly wanted to go through a few slides. This is a really high-level budget overview. We've got about $200 million in annual operating funds separated by 30 different funds. And so our goals as we go throughout trying to create the budget for the fiscal year is to maintain programs that provide safety to our residents. We want to ensure that we are putting aside investment in our infrastructure, both now and in the future. We also are always looking at the long-range plans that our city council have adopted and making sure that we're implementing those to the best of our abilities. As we go through that, we're utilizing timely and accurate data to make our decisions. And so that's a big focus of our city managers to make sure we have the data to back up our decision making. We also have a very conservative budgeting policy. We are estimating our sales tax every year. We base it on what we know to be happening in the current fiscal year. So whatever we're estimating for this year is what we estimate for next year. We don't build in an increase there until the funds actually materialize in that following year. Once they actually materialize and are on the books, that's when we build them into our operating budget. So that first year, as they're building up, they end up rolling to fund balance, and we're able to use those for one-time things or to set aside for rainy day funds. The other thing on our conservative policy is our building permits, all of our development fees. Those are projected annually based on known building activity that's already in the system. So we aren't projecting development to occur before we actually know the people that are working on the projects and in the system is underway. And so that helps us to be a little bit more conservative as well in the budgeting process. The city does have a AAA bond rating, and I'm sure you've probably heard that before. That is the highest rating possible for any municipality. We have that for both our general obligation as well as our utility revenue bonds. Those ratings are reviewed annually by 2 different rating companies. They're based on our financial policies that we have in place right now, our staff levels. We want to make sure that we have consistent staff. We've got low turnover of our financial managers as well as our city council, our city managers, our ACMs. Available cash reserves, the development and use of financial plans. So not that just we have them on the shelf, but that we actually utilize them. And then they want us to be cognizant of the balance between our debt versus cash funding. So all of those things have to be in alignment to get that AAA bond rating, and we try to maintain all of them at all times. Each year we do review our rates and fees annually. The department directors take time to review those annually to make sure that we still are covering the cost of providing the service as well as staying competitive in the Metroplex with other municipalities. And as you can see from the next couple of slides, this is our tax rate comparison. It shows where Louisville's tax rate ranks in comparison to our survey cities, including 16 different survey cities in the Metroplex. You can see here that Louisville is one of the lowest. That's something that we've tried to maintain low, but we do want to make sure we're holding that line so that we get as much revenue as we need to offer the services to our residents, but that we aren't overtaxing our residents. And so that was a good comparison of our tax rate. The second one is our current utility rate comparison. You can see the very bottom line is Louisville's current rate, and the proposed rate is the one that our city council adopted. And so as of October 1st, those rates will go into effect. And you can see that even on this one, when we increased the rates over 6%, we are still one of the lowest in the Metroplex. This was based on all the other cities there, what their current rates were. So I'm not sure what they've done in the last few weeks in terms of their rates, but we would assume that they would increase as well, at least partially. So we'll probably still fall at the bottom or towards the bottom of that comparison. And lastly, I like to include this comparison chart. We don't do this survey. The survey is actually done by the city of Carrollton. And they look at not just property tax, they look at sales tax rates, they look at our water and sewer charges, they look at our drainage fees, our solid waste fees, and they compare those overall to other cities and determine a cost of service comparison. So the lower the better. And Louisville always comes out number one on their survey. So we like to say, hey, we obviously aren't biased here. Louisville is number one. We would hope to be in that top category. You can see Plano, Addison, Frisco, Coppell are all in those top 10, and those are all cities that are growing and vibrant. It does go on down. You can see Denton, the Colony, and this is one survey that we rarely see, that they've actually included Castle Hills as a municipality there. You can see it towards the bottom, and it does have a slightly higher cost of service comparison. But again, this is done by the city of Carrollton, and it's just meant to kind of show you an overall comparison of rates more than anything. And they gauge that cost of service comparison for their residents to let them know how well Carrollton is doing overall.
So I asked Gina, who is our Director of Strategic Services, to do this presentation for the quarterly meeting tonight, and I'm going to be asking her to do this as we go forward, because I think it's important that the residents of Castle Hills understand what becoming part of the city of Louisville means. And what that means is that we are a financially strong city, one of the strongest in the Metroplex. So we'll continue to bring these reports to you as we move forward, so everyone understands everything about Louisville.
So, yes, so specifically, are we doing? No. So specifically, the 2021 budget, we just wanted to hit a couple of highlights. The proposed rate of 443301 was adopted by our city council. 27 employees were actually eliminated from the budget this year. That was in response primarily to revenue decreases that we've seen as a result of COVID primarily, but other non-related, COVID-related revenues as well. We've seen decreases in sales tax projections. We've really, in actuality, sales tax is one of those that's volatile. We don't really know how it's going to respond in the economy right now. So even though our sales tax is really maintaining the line where it's been, we are budgeting a decrease because of the unknown effects of sales tax. Our building fee revenue was decreased. That's based on known activity in the pipeline. We had a revenue in our budget for Thrive. Our new multi-generational rec center just opened. We've removed that revenue because of COVID and not really being able to go out and get those memberships like we had thought we would be able to. Landfill revenue is decreased, and that's because one of our landfills is in the process of closing, and so they're going to be taking less and less revenue, less and less material. And so we will see a decrease in revenue this year and again next year. And then interest earnings are down, as you've probably already seen in your personal interest. Everywhere it's down just a little bit there. So we've also had to make reductions in investment to infrastructure. And those are something we certainly want to be able to get back into the budget as soon as possible. And we'll be working towards that as we see revenues materialize or come in higher than projections during the year. And lastly there, we just wanted to mention that council approved a 6.36% increase in our water and sewer. That's really to support a base amount of cash that we needed for our capital improvements to meet our capital investment in our sewer system. We do think we'll have another increase in the next few years. We've kind of planned out several increases that will help us look at our water system coming up in the future. We do have a study underway right now that's looking at inclining block structures and how we're going to combine Castle Hills and Louisville, what the impacts are going to be to both Castle Hills residents as well as Louisville. And that's underway now. And the last slide that I think, I have two slides, but the last major slide here is the future budget. As our city manager just went over, we're going to be moving towards an overall joint city Castle Hills district budget. This budget that we just started today will still be separate. In 21-22, though, we'll have 10 months of that fiscal year where we're actually already annexed. And so we'll be working with your districts to figure out the budgets that y'all are putting in place that fiscal year, as well as ours, and how we're going to be able to mesh those so that then in 22-23, we'll move to our first consolidated budget. So that's going to be a lot to work through in the coming year to figure out your debt service payments, staffing and equipment needs, all of our contractual services, new service provision, and kind of who will have what in which budget for the 21-22 year. And that's something that we'll be looking for. And this last one, I just wanted you to be aware that we do have a page on our website that shows our annual budgets going back, it looks like at least back to 2008. Including our adopted budget. It's on there now. This one shows preliminary, but we actually have the adopted out there. And that's a great source of information for all of the major changes that happen, as well as the nitty-gritty information. I think there are about 300 pages in all in each budget. So you can definitely get a lot of information about how the city budgets and how our budget looks right now.
So we're open for questions. Like I just said earlier, we're going to be bringing this kind of report to you regularly. So everyone is aware of where we are financially and how we spend our money, how we invest our money, how we look to the future. Are there any questions?
And once again, if you have comments or questions, you can use the chat function or click the raise your hand button and we will unmute you at that point.
Okay, with that, I think, Chief, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right, I'm hoping you all can see the screen. So if you remember, in the last quarterly meeting, we went through the first 2 quarters because we didn't have a meeting during COVID. So this will concentrate on the 3rd quarter. So I'll start with July 2020. So these are the priority 1 calls for service that we responded to during the month of July. And you'll see there's an unconscious person. The address will be a block number. You will not see specific addresses. And then also on the far right, you will see the response time. I will note that the response times to the fires are the police response, not the fire department response. So those are the calls that we went to in July. A couple of vehicle fires, major accidents, overdose, and an unconscious person. So there were only 8 priority 1 calls during the month of July. So this is overall all the calls that we went to in July. And you will see that close patrols were by far the biggest call that we went to, the most responses. After that, the minor accidents, and then commercial burglar alarm and residential burglar alarm behind that. So moving on to August, there were 14 priority 1 calls. And just to remind everyone, the priority 1 calls are the in progress calls, the calls that we respond to immediately whenever they come in. So you'll see there were a couple of fire calls, or majority fire calls on this. Where you see heavy box, that is a structure fire call. That's where they bring a lot more apparatuses than they would typically send to a regular incident. The rescue is a vehicle accident where someone was probably trapped in the vehicle, or it was at least called in that way. And that's why that call is denoted that way. So not very many other than accidents that we actually responded to that month that were priority 1. And here are, once again, is the breakdown of the top 12 most common calls for service that we responded to. And you'll see a pattern with all these. Close patrols were the most common at 84. After that, there were some parking violations, and then suspicious calls, suspicious person calls, or suspicious circumstance type calls. None of these really resulted in any major crimes or anything like that. So September, priority 1 calls. Once again, major accidents are the biggest that we respond to. There was an aggravated assault in the 5500 block of State Highway 121, 1 overdose or 2 overdoses, and a couple of unconscious persons. So the response times by month, I wanted to show this to you for the entire year of 2020. And you'll see that we're right on track to where we were with August, 6.76 minutes for us to respond to calls in the Castle Hills area. And that's steadily gone down from 2019. It was a little bit higher than that. We had some 10-minute response times during those months. So we're steadily bringing those numbers down, and we'll continue to work towards that. I did want to touch on everyone's favorite topic, the golf carts. This is taken directly from the DMV website, and it does explain that when a license plate is required, if it's going to be driven on a public roadway, then license plates are required. And then the bottom of that slide also shows what equipment is necessary to operate on a public roadway. And the speed limits have to be 35 miles per hour or less. And then the final slide that I have is just to show you all that and this is from the DMV website also, due to the governor's declaration order, they're still not, you're not required to have a license plate on your golf cart yet. Once, and that's the red lettering there, once the governor rescinds the governor's declaration, then there will be a 60-day grace period from the time that he ends the declaration before before license plates are mandatory. The last thing I want to show you is something that's relatively new that came out of our Listen, Learn, Lead series, and that's from the Mayor's Commission. We've added an LPD Transparency page to our website. And it's got a lot of information on it. This is just showing parts of it, but the Talking with Chief Devers series that I've done a couple of those, but you'll also find a lot of other useful information where we're trying to make what we do transparent to the public. You will see all of our racial profiling reports, use of force and arrest analysis. Our general orders are posted. All of our frequently asked questions, and we also post a police employee termination report. And that's just to show the public that when we do have issues with police personnel, we do take care of those in a timely manner. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Hey, Kevin, if you can, there we go. All right, I do have a hand here. So Robert, you are now unmuted. Well, you need to unmute yourself though. I've unmuted you, but you need to unmute yourself.
I think that worked.
Yes, we
My question was a couple of things. One of them, this golf cart requirement, does it require the driver to be having a driver's license, or can it be at any age?
I'm trying to think. Now, you stumped me on that one.
They have to have a driver's license.
Yes, you do have to have a driver's license. I was going to have to go to the FAQ section.
I just wondered because I see a lot of children driving golf carts down the street, without licenses and without, license plates. So that's going to change, I guess. Is that correct?
Right. And we're dealing with those as they come up. Our officers are stopping them whenever they have another violation. And if they don't have a driver's license, they're contacting the parents. When we went through our monthly traffic stops, we look at those, and in the narrative, it always says that parents were contacted. And, we're trying to issue warnings on all of those, at least for first-time offenders. If we start seeing repeated violations for that, they can be cited.
And one other question, I live at Lady Devance and King Arthur, and we just put up a three-way stop at that intersection. And the reason was most of the problem was the speeding that went through that intersection. And I've lived here for several years, but I had the house rented for a lot, but it hadn't changed since I first bought the house. Is there going to be some a little bit additional traffic control? Because I tell you what, there's people going down this road at 60 and 70 miles an hour, and they run the stop signs. And I don't know if that's something that we can kind of talk about a little bit.
Absolutely. What's that address again?
Well, I'm at Lady Devance and King Arthur at the corner, just on the, I guess it's the southwest side of the bridge. Anyway, I've noticed this is a problem. It's been a problem since I moved in 2009. In fact, I sold the house because I couldn't stand it any longer, and I never got the house sold, but now I'm back, and I was hoping that maybe there would be a little bit more traffic control throughout the community, because there's a lot of places that I see people just, they're taking advantage of the speed limits because there's not enough police to, to watch them actually.
Right. And the district does pay for the one officer to patrol the area out there. They really want that officer to be able to respond to calls and be visible, not to sit at any one location and work traffic enforcement. But I will contact our traffic department or traffic section and have them focus on that area.
Well, this is not such a problem during the daylight hours, but from about 7 till 11 at night, it's, you know, we're outside in the backyard, so I see all this continually. So I think you could probably get 3 patrol cars full blast, you know, and have enough work to do, but it's gotten kind of ridiculous, actually.
Robert, is that the intersection where the district board just put in new stop signs?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And there was an officer a few days ago that was in front of my house, and he chased down someone and that was doing at least 45 and didn't even slow down at the sign. And, you know, that's not unusual. So it's kind of like a low because you're coming down the hill in both directions. And so it's sort of a natural response to just kind of move fast through that intersection. But it's getting better, I have to say. So that's all I had.
Appreciate it. We will definitely take a look.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. I do see a comment that Brenda Martin added in the chat. Just a reminder that before annexation, police are patrolling a certain number of hours a day by contract and responding to calls for service. After annexation, of course, it'd be full police service. Any other questions or comments? I'm watching for chats or hands raised because this is our last scheduled topic for this evening. Okay, then we'll give you the opportunity here. If you have a topic that was not on our agenda, but you'd like to bring it up, you've got a captive audience here ready to answer as best we can. So again, just either use the chat or QA or raise your hand and we will get you in. Ms. Barron, I do not see any comments or questions.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate those of you who participated tonight. And as James said, we're going to be doing this quarterly. And hopefully you can talk to your neighbors and encourage more people to get involved. We hope to be back out in Castle Hills when we can all be together in person. So please, if other questions come to mind, please know that you can call me, James, Melinda, Gina, any of us that are in the room, Chief Deaver. And we're here to serve. So we appreciate you very much and talk to you later.
Just one more note before you go. On the city website, cityoflouisville.com/Castle Hills is where we put all of our materials for these meetings. We announce the future meetings. We have a ongoing FAQ with major topics. There's also a chance there, if you have questions or if you have a suggestion for a topic, there's a way for you to click a button, send an email, and we will respond very quickly. So we want to hear from you. That is the easiest. Well, we have some chats coming in. Oh, these are thanks. Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we want to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments, don't have to wait for a meeting. Just use the cityoflouisville.com/Castle Hills and send us a note. We'll get back to you quickly.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.